Welcome back to the Student Hub Live. Well, this session is all about being academic, and why not if you're an OU student? This is something important to get to grips with. But what is it all about? So I've asked Matt Staples, chair of DD 102, which is an introduction to the social sciences, to explain what it's all about. Now, Matt, you're chair of DD 102. You joined the Open University in 1995, which I've calculated means that you've worked here for 23 years.
I know.
So what face cream do you use?
No, indeed, man and boy, that's right, I know. Well, it's such a good place to work, and I get so much out of it. Yeah, so yeah.
No, it is lovely. And we were just saying about graduation and how
right.
fantastic and motivating that is.
Yeah.
And also how important it is to bear that in mind right at the very start. But some of our students have been saying, oh, well, I haven't been studying for a while and I'm quite nervous about it. And this whole idea of being academic in particular often plays out in terms of referencing and students worry, what is it all about?
Yeah, no, very much so. I mean, I think referencing's one amongst many. I mean, they're worried about assessment, they're worried about writing in their own words, they're worried about how to engage with the textbooks. One of the things I'd say to students is to go back to basics. And this first couple of weeks before modules start, it's a real opportunity to get a sense of the structure of the course, okay? Because often people are worried about things they needn't be worried about.
Yeah.
They need to just start with baby steps, as it were.
Yeah.
So orientate themselves, get a sense of what the module materials are asking them to do, get a sense of, Susanna's session was very good in terms of time management, because we give a structure to the modules that we produce, and it's to stick to that structure. And with referencing, we start off with very baby steps.
Yeah.
You know, why do you need to reference?
Yeah. And
then we give them, you know, on DD 102 and lots of other modules, we give them examples of how to reference and activities, and those get more difficult as the course goes on. But not to worry about these, you know, oh, we're going to have to reference really difficult things at the start, because we don't ask students to do that. Yeah.
So is it a sense then that students sort of step from being somebody who's doing lots of things with a dog to somebody who's doing lots of things with a study buddy, for example, and all of a sudden there's a sort of sense of elevation or difference between that person?
Well, it's interesting because I think we've got a really diverse student body, and lots of them bring lots of experiences. Some of those, depending upon the course that they are studying, can be actually brought into the module. So on DD 102, sometimes we ask students to apply what they know. We've got forum activities that actually ask them about their street. Okay, so we're very much interested in, you know, them applying their life.
That must be easy to answer. I mean, that's not hard, is it?
Well, but what we're trying to do, we're trying to kind of train them to observe things in a different way. So it's about sometimes it's about taking their life experiences, but then getting them to use them in a very kind of structured way.
Yeah.
And so it's for students to think about, really, OU study, doing a degree as a training, as an academic training, basically. And so sometimes their life experiences won't necessarily be valid because we're looking at something that's very much related to a particular set of module materials.
Yeah.
And so it's about students being able to pivot and understand what the module is asking them to do at a given time.
Right, now this is a really important concept because on one hand you're saying, hey, we're going to invite you to talk about your street, and almost what you're saying is that you've got skills, you've got content, you've got things that are not, I guess, academic or theoretical, and we're asking you to apply those and do these things, but actually then all of a sudden we don't want you to write about your experience of the street in your assignment because here we're after something else. So students come with a lot of experience and things, and as you say, it's very valuable. How do they use that valuable experience and way of looking at the world to, I guess, inform how they see some of these theories?
Yeah, no, very much so. The key thing here is active learning.
Yeah.
It's about getting students to think about their learning in a very clear and coherent way.
Yeah.
And active learning is really ensuring that they know exactly what tasks they're being asked to do, and they've done the kind of the basics in terms of, you know, making sure they've looked at all the module materials, they're following the course structure, and don't run away with their enthusiasm. Because I realise a lot of students come into the university, I mean, I'm looking at the DD 102 welcome form, lots of psychologists, fantastic, you know, and they're really excited and they've read a lot as well.
Have any done the first assignment yet?
No, I don't think yet.
Good.
And if you have, I would ask you not to, basically, because you need to talk to your tutor and you need to go to tutorial, whether face-to-face or online. And that's what I mean. I think a basic mistake sometimes is that enthusiasm runs away with itself. And that's why people join the OU, because they're enthused about a subject. I mean, I love political science, basically, but you need that academic training in order to be able to use the subject, if that makes sense. And that academic training is making sure, you know how to reference properly, you know how to write in your own words, you're engaging with your tutor as well. Because a lot of a student say to me, oh, well, I was a bit scared of contacting my tutor. And that's the first kind of error that students make sometimes. Tutors are there to support them, and these first couple of weeks and going to the first tutorial or day school, they are so important in setting the groundwork for later on.
Yeah. And there's also things like forums, which are great, like you were mentioning as well. I mean, one of my students last year contacted me and said, I'm about to put something on the forum. Do I need to reference it? And there was this whole idea, again, about this sort of, you know, are we writing, for whom are we writing, and where is that going?
Yeah, no, very much so. Well, that's the important thing about pivoting and being an active learner, because in some contexts, you'll just write, you know, whatever you want to write on the forum without the need for referencing. And in some contexts, you will need a very clear set of references. But it depends on the task. And that's the thing. Often students don't necessarily look at the resources that are there to support them to do a given task. We've got scaffolding around all the activities, the assessment activities, and we tell you how to do it and how you need to reference. So it's quite a common thing when I look at essays that actually a student is a bit nervous about referencing and hasn't really engaged in it because of that. If they'd only asked their tutor or looked at one of the online activities. But again, I guess I would say to students, it's about baby steps. So the first activity we have on DD 102 and some of the other modules that I know as well, U116, DD 103, the first question we ask is, well, why do we reference? Actually, and so if you understand why it's important, you then go on to reference very simple things. And then as the course gets more, you know, more advanced, we ask you to reference in a more advanced way. And then on level 2 and 3, you've got the scaffolding to support you to do quite advanced referencing. But it's important to, you know, start at the very beginning.
We asked people at home how they felt about referencing. Let's see what they had to say. So, a lot of people are worried about it. That's the highest ranking thing. Some people, perhaps because at the moment, Matt, we've got 62% of our audience at level 1, but we've got quite a few at level 2 and 3, so perhaps they've had some experience there. But it is an anxiety, and as you say, it's about why you're referencing as opposed to the actual conventions. But often students get very hung up on the actual conventions because they think, if I put the comma in the wrong place, they're going to think I'm a fool.
No, not at all. And it's in the trying that we learn how to do it better, I would say. I've lost my train of thought now. One of the things that's interesting is that often we look at the stats on the referencing activities, actually, and some students don't engage with them. And it's important it's important to think about the course as a holistic enterprise, as it were. And so read the books, enjoy the material, and then go online or use whatever other resources to help you understand and to frame that material. And part of that's the referencing. And so we've got TMAO 1 coming up. You know, go online, have a look at the referencing activity. Do try to reference, and invariably it won't be right first time, but that's not a crime. I think students are terrified about assessment. But again, I would stress at level 1, it's a pass-fail. And actually, you know, so they don't have to get 100%, basically. It's a learning process, and that's deliberate. It's deliberately pass-fail, so you can make mistakes and not worry too much about it.
And it doesn't count as much towards your degree classification as level 3, which is very
and that's important as well.
So
it's a learning zone. You know, I think that's really important. And actually making mistakes and then developing from that, taking on board what's happened, is a really important process as well.
I love this idea of pivoting, Matt, because what you're saying is that, you know, you've got the theoretical content that most students will be really excited about, and that seems very sort of solid and robust, but also it's the skills that students are going to need to develop that will sort of come and foreground them for later on. And also all the other things to supplement their learning, like if you're worried about the referencing, there's stuff you can do. So it's about shifting what's what, but bearing in mind that the content is often there to sort of drive you through, but there's a lot else going on, isn't there?
There is. And, you know, referencing is just one part of it. You know, on a lot of the social science modules, we're developing, you know, kind of numerical skills as well. You know, we're teaching students how to write in your own words and what writing in your own words actually means. And, you know, how to write short essays, how to write long essays. Basically, how to think about materials, how to read materials, how to note-take from materials, because there are, you know, various structures and ways of doing these things that students wouldn't think about. Now, again, lots of students have really good experiences. You know, most people will run a budget of some sort, and so actually quite a lot of students are quite good at maths actually, but it's about applying that in a framework which is more structured. Again, lots of people will be writing in their own words. And they will have family conversations. It's like, well, how do you know that's the case? Well, I read it in the paper. Well, you're kind of referencing back to something. So people reference every day, but it's about doing so in a much more structured environment.
Okay, so here's the thing then, because we give students wonderful books, you know, module materials, often written in a really lovely chatty tone, sometimes packed with theories that are very, very complex. But for some students, there's this idea that, well, hang on, you're talking to me like this in this nice chatty tone, so I'm going to write to you like this, my tutor, in an assignment. Tone is a very important thing, especially when writing in your own words. And it's not something, because of the way that the materials are presented, is always synonymous with an assessment. Tell us about how that works.
Well, indeed. I mean, you're being trained academically. So what we're asking students to do is kind of engage with their writing in a much more structured academic way, I think. So even if, you know, the tone of the book or the resource you're using is chatty, as it were, your response needs to be more thoughtful than you would have used in, you know, in everyday life, as it were. Sometimes it will be applied or reflective, you know, to your particular life. Sometimes it will just be, you know, engaging in a much more theoretical way. But it's about a structure and about writing academically,
And every area will be very different, because in some discipline areas they want a very reflective tone, but in some areas there are certain sort of methods that are encouraged, like circles of inquiry.
That's right, no, very much so. We use a circuit of knowledge, for example, on DD 102. I'm thinking in HSC, you know, there will be a lot of applied work, because often it's quite vocational, the assessment. And as I say, on DD 102, sometimes we're asking students to apply a particular assessment question to their own lives. Sometimes it's very much about the module material. And so it's moving from the kind of personal pronoun, my experience, I think, to, you know, a non-personal pronoun, basically. And so that's the thing about active learning, about really making sure you know what you're doing at a given point in time, rather than just charging ahead, which is why we have the structure. And why I go back to the idea of an academic training. Not trying to get too far ahead, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And you need the space to be able to learn and consolidate. Our next session's about reading and note-taking, so I don't want to cross into that. But it sounds to me like what you're saying is there's this conceptual difference between reading something that's a teaching material and reconstructing it in your own words to something that is then academic. I mean, that's a big task.
No, it is. It is. I mean, massive task. No, completely. I mean, my tips on that, I would say, is you've got to be able to understand, you know, if you're trying to translate it into your own words, I would use quite simple, you know, words to do that. I mean, part of writing in your own words is enabling anybody who's reading it to see that you understand it. So, I mean, invariably, the people who are reading it are informed. They know the module materials as your tutor. You know, so don't worry too much about that. So simply writing is better than trying to be very, you know, dare I say, highfalutin and complicated.
Because then you just have to go and look the words up and see what they mean.
No, very much so. So you're reassembling things in fairly simplistic ways, I think, initially, and that will get more advanced as you go through the university. So it's about ensuring that you understand it and also that you've internalised it, basically, and you're reproducing it in a manner which shows you understand it well. There's something else I wanted to ask you, Matt, which is about this importance of the whole sort of premise of the university, which is sending out these lovely books. Students then do their assessment, and ultimately we're assessing their learning on something. Now, you mentioned before that the module materials were already central, especially at level 1, but equally students take their own experience and wisdom, you know, in the world that they've grown up in, and they'll sort of often apply that and conceptualise that to what they're writing about. But tell us about the importance of really focusing on those module materials in assessment, and really what the aim of that assessment is trying to do, as you were saying, to demonstrate understanding. No, very much so. This is a problem when, you know, when we do see, you know, when people bring in things that are from their own life, because it's not what's required of them. You know, so it's very much a case of ensuring they engage with the student notes, basically, because your tutor will have read the module materials and you will have read the module materials, and so it's your tutor as the marker ensuring that you have a good cognition, a good understanding of what's being asked of you, and even if you're writing in your own words, that you've done so in a way that shows you understand the concepts or the theories or the task at hand. Okay. It's so important.
So it's really important to understand what is required from that module, what is required on that task, and then ultimately what you're being assessed on is your ability to deliver on that specific task, not on your understanding of the world. And often, I guess, I see it myself with people who are very interested in psychology. They'll have all of this experience and they'll want to write about it, and it's so brilliant, but you think, but that's not what this question here is about.
No, very much so. And I think it's fantastic because a lot of students have got a lot of background knowledge actually, and I see it across a whole variety of different modules, and it's fantastic they have that, and it's often quite difficult to kind of track back, and just focus on what is at hand at that particular given time. And often we have students who've done A-level psychology or have done previous degrees, and they have a huge amount of life experience, but it's difficult not to rein in that enthusiasm. And
it's hard because I guess you've got to think this is a simple task, and if I have all this, I must focus on doing that well as opposed to everything. It all comes, doesn't it? Kate and Tamsida, how's everyone at home?
We've got a few students that are really worried and panicky because they've received their module materials and just prioritising time against that. So there's a lot of students that are supporting each other, saying, trying open learn, doing short courses just to prepare themselves. And then we've got Miriam here who's saying she's reading through her materials and taking notes and making mind maps.
Oh, very good, fantastic.
Already, And John is saying he's finding referencing very time consuming. So it's just trying to get things in order.
No. I mean, it is time consuming, but what I would say, I think it's so important. It's as important as an awareness of the module materials. And, because A, it shows you're using materials that are relevant to the subject matter, actually, and it shows that you know where to go, and it's just absolutely crucial.
At level 1, for new students who have access to the library that we've been telling them about, are they expected to go beyond what's in the module and do a lot of extra research?
No, I think at level 1 they're not. I mean, I was going to say, in terms of resources, most of the level 1 social science modules, and I know U16 as well in STEM, they have specific resources for referencing, but there's also the library resources available. But as I say, at level 1, normally you're kind of bounded and required to focus on the specific module materials. As you progress through, that enthusiasm which we talk about, and I don't want to say to students don't have it because it's a fire within them about a subject that gets them through. That's going to be very useful, I think, as they progress through, because at levels 2 and 3 you're going to be asked to engage much more with independent study, which will enable you to go and choose external materials. And so don't be frustrated at level 1, get the basics right, and once you've got the basics right of learning how to reference, how to be numerate in an academic context, how to write in your own words, how to structure pieces of work. Once you've got those, your ability to use that enthusiasm and to use the material you're interested in will be much better, actually. And, so it's both of those things together,
Because I think one of the most important things is that point that you made earlier about acknowledging the source, or who said what, basically.
That's right.
And so in these lovely books, we'll often have a chapter author who will be the main source of referencing students will want to be referring to. But they might also refer to some of the big thinkers or theories or something else. So you'll have these secondary sources also.
Sure.
How might you encourage students to sort of notice who's saying what and also from what perspective? Because they can do this as they're reading through and think again about how that might sort of hold up and compare to their experiences of the world.
No, very much so. I mean, what we try to do, we try to bring in invariably big ideas. Are from the big theorists. Unfortunately, a lot of them are dead white men, invariably.
And they're often about that big in a book as well.
No, that's
so
right. Exactly. No, very much so. The theoretical framework which underpin a particular subject, or indeed E102, the social sciences, which is a variety of subjects. And so, we are training them and bringing in these big people. But then what the module materials are trying to do, we're trying to explain and contextualise those. So again, it's important not for students to go away and really focus on that theorists too much, you know, to go externally, because we're using these big theorists or these big ideas, big concepts in a quite structured way. Again, I keep on coming back to structure.
Yeah.
You know, and for students to rein in that enthusiasm and think about those theorists in the context of what they're being specifically asked.
Yeah.
Often
yeah.
quite frustrating, because we often give them what we call vignettes.
Yes.
Just a little bit about Marx, or
Yeah.
a little bit about, you know, Weber or somebody, and that's quite frustrating. You think, wow, there's so much more to see, and there is, but it's about, I suppose it's a process of revealing
Yes.
over time.
Yes.
And it's going to be over 3 years or 4 years or 6 years. You will get to know these people much, much more fully as time goes on. Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, Michael says it's such a good conversation. It's really putting his mind at rest.
Good.
So I'm pleased about that, Michael. Yeah, because you're right. You know, sometimes students can be very tempted to go, and I don't recommend this, going and looking, seeing what Weber did say, because there'll be hours in the library.
Yeah.
You know, but equally, it's about sort of saying, OK, well, you've given me this information, you've given me this task. How can I meet what you're asking me to do? What is the learning here, without sort of going too much into detail on that? And there are a lot of sessions as well with the library. If you're worried about referencing, they do a lot of workshops and training events, which we'll fill you in on. You can look at those from library events, and they've got a large amount of sections this week actually on Facebook, so you can take a look at those. So Matt, what can students do if they're worried about some of these things? Because it is natural and it is a thing to get your head around. What would you recommend that they do?
Okay, well, first thing first, I would go to the introductory week or introductory activities on DD 102. We've got an introduction in the section just before week 1, and we give you a structure of kind of an itinerary of things you can do. One of the activities is actually thinking about the skills they've already got.
Yeah.
Because again, a lot of students, lucky and confident, thinking, oh, I can't do any of this. Actually, you know, when I think of all the things that people do, they've got jobs, they've got children, you know, they're multitasking already. There's a huge amount of skill base they've already got. And it's just about taking that and honing it in a slightly different way. So one of the activities is actually, I think it's DD 102's Got Talent, we call it. Basically thinking about the skills they've got. So, and then working through using the scaffolding that each course they're working on provides. I think that's ever so important. And again, you know, Susanna was talking about time management. We have specified a certain amount of hours. So another skill, I would say, it's important to try to focus on the amount of time you really do need. Not to skimp it, just be honest. Lots of students are doing 2 courses at once, I see on the forum. That's fine, but it's going to be 30 hours a week. And so you've got to make sure you're ready and prepared, and you've got everything in place for that amount of studying. Just doing one 60-point course is 15 hours a week. It's quite a commitment, actually. And so you need to make sure you're ready, and using these couple of weeks to make sure you know what the course is going to entail, where all the resources are. When you get your tutor details, and this is so important, I can't emphasise this enough to students, you have to develop that relationship with the tutor, I think, as a sounding board. One of the key things for me when people talk about, you know, what's the most important thing that you've learnt, I would say it's having a relationship. When I, you know, did my masters, you know, I ensured, and my teacher ensured, that we had a really strong relationship, and actually we spoke to each other and engaged, and there was a, you know, a proper relationship there. You really need to develop that with your tutor, because they're there to support you. The better you know them, the better they can support you.
And I'm assuming that when you say relationship, you don't mean just getting on with or it being one way. A relationship is a reciprocal agreement.
That's right.
It's saying, I need help with this, how can you help me? Can you help me or not?
That's right.
And then how can we sort of work together on something?
Exactly. It's a reflective kind of process, really. You know, looking at the feedback, again, you know, I think a lot of students, and I get this, I completely get this, a lot of students are kind of mark-driven. You know, they want to do well, and I think that's completely fair enough, but it's about ensuring they're reading all the comments from the tutor. They're looking at ways they can engage, whether that's the forum, whether that's through the day schools or online tutorials, because attendance is sometimes not good. And I know on Facebook people say, oh, you don't need to go. Actually, I think it's a really good idea, particularly at the start, that students do go to tutorials, actually, because you get a sense of how the module actually works, you know, who your tutor is, and being an active learner is really engaging with what you're being asked to do. you know, and so using all the tools available to you.
Yeah. And you meet great. I'm best friends with somebody I met at my first tutorial about 19 years ago, and you know, that was an amazing experience just to meet other students and hear how they were all getting on as well. So Matt, one of the things you've said here that I think is really worth reiterating at the end of the session is that these modules are scaffolded in a way that builds up gently, and that no one's expecting you to all of a sudden be amazing and really academic and get all your referencing right. There are bite-sized sections, and what you're saying is work with your tutor, because these pieces of assessment start out small and get bigger and actually don't matter towards your degree classification at level 1. So this is a learning zone.
Yeah, no, very much so. And it's stepped as well. You know, each learning step builds upon what you've done before. So don't, I mean, it's a massive temptation. We're all guilty of it. Don't try to race ahead. Use what you've learned. And then go on to the next step. And so in, you know, however many years it takes you to get your degree, by the end of it, you'll have all that learning to kind of use and benefit from. So but it's important that you use the steps gradually. And you know, you do all the activities, you know,
because you need time to reflect on them, and very often you're doing them over and over. It's a similar sort of thing, isn't it, as you're building on those skills.
That's right, and that's the thing about a training. You know, if you were doing an apprenticeship, you would do the same thing over and over again in order to master that particular, you know, skill. And it's the same with referencing. You know, eventually you'll be doing it with your eyes shut. You know, but you will, you know, you do need to be able to practice it time and time again. And that's why we do 120 points at level 1 now in most subjects. So you've got multiple chances to practice those skills.
So by the end of it, you'll be confident, and it's every little time you'll get better and better.
Yeah, well, that's the plan, and that's what we try to do. You know, when we structure modules and structure degrees, we have learning outcomes, and those learning outcomes, what we expect you to have achieved, they build on each other progressively.
Brilliant. Matt, thank you. That's been a really, really useful session. And you've certainly put a lot of people at ease. So thank you.
Great.
I'm sure all the DD 102 students as well will like seeing you here. So thank you.
Great.
Right, in our next video, we're going to show you a little bit of the campus, which is where we're streaming live from. And we're going to show you one of the buildings, which is the Beryl building. And then we'll give you a trailer for our Adobe Connect session. So if this is something you'd like to work on, in 3 weeks in October, we're going to be doing sessions in Adobe Connect that are open for any student, and they're all going to focus on writing. So we'll look at how to understand what your assignment's asking you, how to build on those skills, and include things like referencing as well. So that's open to everybody. You can join us for that, and we'll show you the trailer. Then we will be back for our next session, which is going to look at reading and note-taking. So some very important skills. We'll see you back in 5 minutes after this break.